right. Hey, everybody. Mr. Newey here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your LEQs. We're going to do an LEQ this week. And it's been about 3 or 4 weeks since we last talked about the LEQ, so I did want to touch base again to talk about the skills. To talk about the skills and to talk about your rubric. If you haven't figured out by now, you can be, average. You can be average at the history thing, but as long as you know what the rubric is looking for and how to prove these AP US history skills, you don't have to sink on an essay. You can even be an average writer. As long as you know what your intention is, you're going to be okay. So first off, what I've got here is your rubric, your AP US History LEQ rubric. You're going to notice there are 6 total points, which is different from the DBQ. That one had 7 points. With that, the rubric itself, again, very similar. We do contextualization, we do thesis. Those are exactly the same thing that we do on the DBQ. Gotta love it. With this, where it gets a little different is your examples, but it's also not really that much different. Where with the DBQ, you were given 7 documents. You had to use those 7 documents to some extent to prove your thesis. After you do your context here in your thesis, you yourself, you don't get the crutches of having documents. You need to think of the evidence. So this is, the LEQ really blends the shorter answer question, how you need to know your evidence for that, and the DBQ together. So you need to know your evidence, know your content, and explain it. So point number 1 here, provide specific examples of evidence that is relevant to the topic of the prompt. To earn this point, the response must identify 2 or more specific examples of evidence that is relevant to the topic, or the prompt. And again, AP does not mean advanced placement, it means answer the prompt. I've seen some lazy thesis statements lately that it hints at the prompt, but doesn't answer anything. Make sure it's a defensible claim, and we'll be golden. To get the second point here, to earn 2 points, you have to support the argument. So to earn 2 points, the response must use specific historical evidence to support an argument in this here. All right? So as we take a little bit of a look here, your ability to dig deeper as to why that evidence proves. Don't just state this evidence proves, really get into detail and argue how that evidence proves your point in your thesis. All right. To get into the other section here for analysis and reasoning, you can earn 2 more points, the 5th and 6th point of the essay. You're going to notice with how the question's worded what type of historical question it is. And for the LEQ, you can see comparison questions, causation questions, or continuity and change over time. Comparison, causation, or continuity and change over time. To get this, if as you list off your evidence to support your thesis, you're explaining why that evidence supports your thesis, your ability to also really truly compare, if it's a comparison question, or to really get to what causes things to happen, get to the root of the problem, or to really talk about how something stays the similar or is different over time. Continuity, how it stays the same. Change, how it's different. Your ability to do that can really help out your ability. I just said ability too much, but it can really help you get this point. So this is, it doesn't have to do both sides, because usually you're comparing or you're really getting into a couple of different things here. It can be pretty one-sided to get that point. And then lastly, this one was from your DBQ as well, demonstrating a complex understanding of the historical development. That is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or even modify an argument that addresses the question. And again, we've talked about this before. If we go to this second bullet point right here, explaining both similarity and differences, both the continuity and change or the multiple causes and effects. Hey, if you can get to both sides, and I would try and have 2 and 2 to be safe, you can get this 6 point. This is a toughest point, just like on the DBQ. This is the rarest point that they're going to hand out. A lot of essays will maybe have context, thesis. You'll have some evidence. You might be successful. This is a tougher one too. You might be successful giving background analysis and support and really arguing how that evidence proves your thesis here. People might be able to kind of get into the historical reasoning and argue it the way that the prompt wants. But this is the rare one. Can you do both? Can you really argue similarities and differences if it's a comparison question? Can you really argue how it changes or stays the same over time if it's continuity and change? And can you really get into causes and effects if it's causation? Your ability to do all of that is the ticket to 6. A great essay, I'm thinking a great essay are 4s and 5s on this. You don't need to be perfect, but these both, I would say the first 3 points are very doable on this, ladies and gentlemen. Context, thesis, have some evidence to identify 2 or more specific historical examples that are relevant to the prompt. So we're shooting for at least 2, baseline 2, but let's try and have 4. You get about 45 to 50 minutes to do this essay, so you can for sure have more than 2 pieces of evidence and argue them. Yeah. So as we look here are 3 possible questions for this week's LEQ. Evaluate the extent to which government played a role in the recovery of America between 1929 and 1940. Describe, that's causation. So how did the government cause a recovery? To what extent did the government cause a recovery? It doesn't say causation in there, but if you look here, evaluate the extent to which the government played a role in the recovery. So it's the government causing a recovery. So what did the government do to get the economy rolling and get a recovery? Continuity and change over time. Describe and explain significant continuities and changes in the role of the federal government in the U.S. between 1892 and 1936. And then comparison. Evaluate the extent to which the Republican Party differed from and were similar to those of the Democratic Party from 1920 to 1936. So we're seeing the comparison between the Republicans and the Democrats right there. 3 possible choices, 3 different historical thinking learning skills in this, ladies and gents. So I hope you can kind of see the different things that you need to do, evidence you need to bring in, and ways you need to argue that evidence based on the type of question that it is. 6 total points. A great essay at this stage of the game has 4. An okay essay, a decent essay is 3. And any of the 5s and 6s, those are elite. Good job. I'm going to sign off now, but I'm going to load this up so you guys can review this so that you're ready for your LEQ this week.